Ron Paul, is exposing all the sneaky schemes of the central bank in the US, the Federal Reserve. In a new interview, he really goes all out and makes it very clear, point by point, why the Federal Reserve is even responsible for wars. He also says that there's no gold in Fort Knox and that we're all being massively fooled. This all started in 1971, and now we've waited so many years, over 50 years, for this to come to light. And now we're seeing more and more people reporting on it. Elon, Marcus, Donald Trump, they want to audit Fort Knox now. Ron Paul is right there pushing for it, saying audit, audit, audit. We need to check the Federal Reserve, Fort Knox, and so on. All these sneaky schemes need to be uncovered. And he even talks about a bankruptcy. He says here that the Federal Reserve has been bankrupt since 1971. Check this out. And now these statements are making their way into the mainstream. For a long, long time, people have laughed at such statements, saying, yeah, come on, everything's fine. But now these statements are making their way into the mainstream. For the people who don't know, Ron Powell is someone who has been around for 20 years. Or I don't know how long, 30 years, 10 years, no idea. He's been saying it for a very, very long time. And the Fed. So shut down the central bank in the US. He's been preaching it over and over again. Here with the FBI wanting to audit the Fed or control it now that Donald Trump wants to do it, and now that Elon Musk wants to do it, this is the big moment for Ron Paul. And we're going to take a look at what he said in this new interview. Because Ron Paul is probably the one who has dealt with the Fed the most. But he also clearly says, on the other hand, I have no evidence, I can't prove that there's no money in Fort Knox, for example. But I can clearly say that the Fed is a criminal gang. And we're diving into that now. Here's the interview with Ron Paul. In the end, we even have an exciting statement from Marcus Grahl, who also shot back at this. He also gave some context about Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve scandal.
If we'd have had to pay for, say, all the wars we've been in, there'd have been a lot less wars. So,
did you hear that? He clearly says, if we had to pay for all the wars, there would be a lot fewer wars, because that's pretty obvious. Wars are financed through the printing press. And that is also the argument that many, many Bitcoiners bring up. They say, hey, Bitcoin was unaffordable. But just as Bitcoin was unaffordable, so too does a hard money standard like gold or other things. So if you use gold, if you use these hard currencies, you simply can't finance wars through the printing press. And Ron Paul is also taking on the deep state here. He doesn't hold back at all. And he clearly says what a lot of people are keeping quiet about. He said, folks, wars are being financed through the Federal Reserve and the fiat money cartel, and that has to do with the Federal Reserve. That's why we need to check this whole thing, expose it, and bring it to light. Huge, mind-blowing revelation here already. But it goes way, way deeper.
The wealth that we had and the ability to have a military and the ability to have the reserve currency in the world was a big temptation for the politicians, and the people liked it too. The more you promise, the more we'll vote for you. And both parties have been, very, very good at spending money and offering more stuff to the people. They're still trying to do it, but right now they're running out of steam, and that's why I think this year is going to be different and is already different than ever before, because we're getting something done that I've been arguing forever, especially with the Fed. Audit, audit, audit. Let's find out what they're doing. It's a shame that it's gotten this far. That's the biggest, the most important thing we can do is to continue with these audits that Leon and Trump have.
So he says here, the most important thing we can do now here in the United States is audit, audit, audit. Check, check, check. This whole thing needs to be exposed because these are shady dealings that are no longer timely. And he says it here too. There's always been that temptation over many, many years. Making promises to the people, living beyond our means, living above the standards. You just make campaign promises saying, okay, hey, if you vote for me, you'll get the social packages. And how is it funded? It's all about the printing press. It's not funded by savings, but it's funded by printed money. And now a welfare state has been created here. That it's massively inefficient, and now there are things like the Department of Government Efficiency, and he's going to go down there too. He mentions Elon Musk and Donald Trump saying, hey, now we really need to set things straight and expose all the fraud cases, which all have their root problem in the Federal Reserve. Because it's only through this fiat money cartel and the endless money printing, or not exactly endless money printing, but we're already at a level where it's looking really, really bad. He says, yeah, the situation doesn't look good. It's not quite collapsing yet, but he'll touch on that later. Why we are already pretty much bankrupt here, and the system has actually been like this for 50 years, but somehow still keeps going. And his thesis is that everything has to come to an end now. Because if we end the Fed, if we take down this whole fiat money cartel, then all that inefficiency will disappear too. It was first established through the existence of this fiat money monopoly. And those are some really strong statements where he really puts himself out there. But he really seems to have the guts to pull this off. And he's been doing this for 20 years now. And now he's finally being heard here. I actually just did some research. It actually says on ChatGPT that he's been fighting to end the Fed since the 70s. So it's not true about the 20 years. It's actually been 50 years already. Check out this awesome view we've got here. From my new video studio here, or video studio, outdoor home office, I don't know what to call it. Here at El Sant Beach, the beach where I'm going to take a swim later. But now let's keep going with Ron Paul, see what else he has to say.
Do you believe the U.S. government has all the gold that it claims to have?
No, I don't. But I don't have evidence to prove it. A lot of people write about it and explain it. But no, in a way, if they did, why wouldn't they want to clear the air? Why wouldn't they have a commission that I was included in? And let's go and see and convince us that you have the gold. So no, even if they showed us the gold, maybe the gold has been loaned out. They do a lot of loaning gold, and they have other ways of having a gimmick to deceive the people, and they can get away with that for years and years.
So he says quite clearly here, the Federal Reserve no longer has all the gold reserves that they claim to have. That doesn't mean they have zero gold, but they probably have significantly lower gold reserves than what's being stated. The big problem that he is saying here is that he has no evidence, which is also the problem that a lot of people have. There's a lot of speculation, but there's just not much real evidence. I mean, there are a few people who say, okay, you have some indirect evidence or whatever, but to really say, okay, there are pictures or something showing that there's no gold or anything like that, that's just not there. You just don't find that kind of thing here. And he also asks, why would you publish it? So it's actually a lose-lose situation for the US. That's also what a lot of people have said. Why would Donald Trump publish that? Because if he publishes it, and if the US has their gold, then not much is going to happen. If you've already stated, okay, they have this much gold, then maybe it'll mean something. Strengthen the trust, but not substantially. But if they don't have gold, it's going to massively weaken the dollar, because then you have the problem of a huge loss of trust. And that's a big problem. So basically, as Donald Trump or the US government, you can only lose here. But if you really want to give the power back to the people, then you have to do the audit. Because it's just outrageous. It's simply a scandal that's happening here. Probably the biggest financial scandal in US history, or one of the biggest financial scandals. Or you have to say the two biggest financial scandals are definitely the Federal Reserve and Fort Knox. And that together is the absolute super win. And then he talks about how everything is being lent out here. And so there are all sorts of scenarios. But now there was another exciting assessment from Marcus Grahl, who also deals very intensively with gold, has also written something very, very interesting about it here. And there's currently this story that a whole lot of gold is being pulled out. For example, from the Bank of England, that the Bank of England can't keep up anymore. And here they are actually having delivery issues. If they can't deliver all the gold that's supposed to be pulled out, then you have to wait 3 for 5 months. I've had that happen before too. I mentioned that in another video. And on top of that, it came out that the Bank of England has some gold bars that aren't even real. But that was back in 2022 or 2021, so it's been a while. And now there are a whole bunch of shady stories coming to light. And now Dr. Marcus Grahl, talking about gold, said that 2,000 tons have been brought to the US since the beginning of December. The largest transfer of gold in such a short time in the history of mankind. You guys have to wrap your heads around that. Here, the largest transfer. And it's completely implausible to assume that this is caused by the feared tariffs from the Trump administration. Trump never announced that he wanted to impose tariffs on raw materials or even precious metals. The reason lies elsewhere. That's the reason you've heard a lot about, all those tariffs. And now there's panic, and everyone wants to avoid the tariffs. But Marcus Grahl clearly said, no. It's not about the tariffs here. He's giving a different reason now. He's saying here, in the announced audit of the gold reserves of the Federal Reserve in New York and at Fort Knox, clearly, the responsible parties have been up to no good here, lending out gold in large quantities without any oversight in the past. That's the big question now. That's also what Ron Paul said, that all this gold is being lent out. And now he's saying here, now they're trying to fill the reserves in time so they don't get caught like the cat on the kitchen table. These reserves haven't been audited for decades. Also, a few hundred tons of gold from the Bundesbank could be at risk. The question arises, who is liable if they go missing? If some of the 8,000 tons of gold from the US government are missing, then that will signal the end of the Fed. One thing's for sure, and that's a bombshell statement here, and it also confirms what Ron Paul is saying. With the lending of the gold, and that the gold isn't really there anymore. And now they're really trying to save their own skin here. Now they're trying to somehow get the gold into the US. The problem is, with gold, you can't just press a button like you can with Bitcoin and say, okay, hey, we're just going to move a few billion here into Fort Knox or something like that. But you really have to imagine it like this. if several tons of gold are supposed to be delivered to Fort Knox or brought into the U.S. Also, take a look here, it's a bullish signal. If that's not bullish, I don't know what is. The bulls are just coming up. So the bulls are doing well. Super cool. A lot of people always say I mix up bulls and cows. Let me know in the comments, is this a bull or is it a cow? No idea. Definitely, it looks like they're trying to save their own skin by filling up the warehouses here. But the problem is you can't just pile it all up at once. You have to do it over the years. And the problem is now there's pressure here. We somehow missed the year and nobody checked. And now people want to verify it. So they have to quickly buy up the gold, scoop it up fast, and fill their pockets again. So then you have the problem of figuring out how to do it without making it too obvious. On the other hand, they can't let the gold price shoot up too much. On the next page, they also want to keep transportation costs low. On the other hand, it's a security issue. How do you make sure it happens safely and all that? And these are all problems, security problems, transport problems that simply don't exist with Bitcoin. And that's the crazy part here, why this is also a really strong argument for Bitcoin and why the whole development is very, very bullish for Bitcoin. Later in the interview, Ron Paul will touch on that. One thing is that the Federal Reserve has actually been bankrupt since 1971 because since then, they haven't had any gold. And that's what he equates with bankruptcy because it's just a total sham now. That the fiat system was created by the Nixon shock in '71. He was later asked by Natalie Brunell in the interview what he thinks about Bitcoin. And then the answer was really, really nice. So he said he actually has no idea about Bitcoin because he doesn't really understand all the computer stuff and so on. But here he says, hey guys, who cares? You can use whatever you want. You can use gold, you can use fiat money, you can use Bitcoin. It's not the government's job to tell you what you can and can't do. You can do whatever you want completely freely. He advocates for a free currency market. Then he made the statement and said, as far as I'm concerned, if you want, you can even deal in bananas. You can use bananas as money. That doesn't matter at all. That's definitely a really, really cool attitude because that's exactly what you need. In free currency competition, you have to audit all the shitcoin boats here, audit Fed, audit Fort, all the other stories, IRS and USAID, and so on, audit all of that. Because it's best not to just do it in the US, but also in Europe. So auditing the central bank, I've seen a lot of people saying, yeah, hey, Fed audit, great. But we also want to audit the central bank here in Europe, the ECB. And that's the crazy part of what's going on here. We are at a complete turning point in time. Guys, if you're bullish on Bitcoin right now, I'm going to drop a link for you down below. 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Here, with the code, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I'm signing off here from El Salvador. Guys, see you. Peace out.